On the 5th anniversary of Bruno's death, I finally finished paying off all his debts. But my body had reached its limit. With my health completely destroyed, I could do nothing but lie on my hospital bed, waiting to die. I never expected that Bruno, along with his parents, who were supposed to be dead, would casually walk into my room. "Miriam, you're such a fool," Bruno smirked. "I never actually died. I just won the lottery and didn't want to split the money with you, so I faked my death and ran away to escape my debts. I never thought you'd actually believe it." He chuckled, shaking his head as if my pain and suffering were nothing more than a joke. "But still, thanks for taking care of my parents all these years. You really did a great job supporting them. I'll remember you, okay? So just rest in peace." It was only at that moment, seeing the faces of his parents, who clearly knew everything all along, that I finally understood. Everything I had given, every sacrifice I had made, was nothing more than a pathetic joke. But when I opened my eyes again, I found myself back on the day of Bruno's fake death. This time, without hesitation, ignoring the desperate protests of his parents, I dragged him straight into the crematorium. "If you're already dead, then just stay that way." Chapter 1. When I received a call from the hospital, I wasn't surprised at all. In my previous life, Bruno faked his death on this very day. By the time I arrived at the hospital, Bruno's parents were already there, their expressions flustered and uneasy. I pretended not to notice, clenched my hands to keep myself calm, and put on an expression of grief as I asked, "Dad, Mom, what happened? How could Bruno just die so suddenly?" They clearly hadn't expected me to arrive so quickly. After a brief moment of hesitation, they turned the blame on me instead. "It's all because of you. You jinx. If it weren't for you, Bruno wouldn't have worked so hard just to earn money, and he wouldn't have died from a sudden heart attack. My poor son, ever since he married you, his life has been nothing but misery. In my previous life, I believed their lies, drowning in guilt, and became their servant for 5 whole years. And in the end, I was literally driven to my death by them. But this time, I won't be so foolish." I pretended to be overwhelmed with grief, throwing myself over Bruno's body, wailing hysterically, "Because of me? It's all because of me? Bruno, wake up! Tell me, was it all because of me? Say something! Answer me!" As I cried out, I slapped his face. Hard. Smack. "This slap is for deceiving me all these years." Smack. "This slap is for betraying our marriage." Smack. "And this slap is for your entire family, who are worse than animals." The sharp sound of my slaps echoed through the room, deafening. Bruno's head tilted from the force, and I caught the subtle twitch of his eyelids. A cold smirk crept onto my lips. "So, you can feel everything, huh?" Not satisfied yet, I raised my hand again, but before I could strike, Bruno's parents rushed forward to stop me. "Miriam, are you crazy? What the hell are you doing?" Their faces were filled with disbelief. After all, I had always been obedient, tolerating every insult without complaint. When had they ever seen me like this before? I flashed them a gentle smile, tears shimmering in my eyes. "Mom, I'm heartbroken. I just can't believe Bruno is gone." They looked at my sorrowful expression, clearly uncomfortable, but could only grit their teeth and endure it, because they knew the fake death drug they gave Bruno wouldn't last long. If we dragged this out any longer, their lie would be exposed. In my past life, just before I died, Bruno had walked into my hospital room with his parents, grinning smugly. That was when he revealed the truth. Bruno's family had a long line of traditional healers, and they had inherited several ancient medicinal formulas. One of them was a pill called Wan, which could induce a temporary death-like state. When someone took it, their body would exhibit all the signs of death. Yet they remained fully conscious and aware. The effect lasted 6 hours, after which they could move normally again, without any side effects. As I lay on my deathbed, gasping for breath, Bruno laughed as he told me this, his parents watching with amusement. At that moment, I was so filled with hatred that I couldn't even breathe. And then, I died. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to this very day. 5 years in the past. "Miriam, don't be too sad. It's summer. and the body will start to rot quickly. We should move Bruno to the morgue as soon as possible. I hid the cold amusement in my eyes, watching Bruno's parents continue their little act. They were getting impatient. I knew they were desperate to get him out of here before the drug wore off. I smiled. Mom, why move him to the morgue? It's so hot today. Wouldn't it be better to just cremate him immediately? That way, he can rest in peace sooner. Chapter 2. In my previous life, I arrived too late. I never even saw Bruno's body. His parents handed me an urn filled with ashes, claiming it was him. When I asked why they cremated him so quickly, their excuse was simple. The weather is too hot. We wanted Bruno to be buried as soon as possible. This time, I turned their excuse against them, eager to see how they would react. No, absolutely not. Bruno's father rejected my proposal without hesitation. His mother, startled by my words, quickly stepped forward to stop me. You wicked woman, you just want to burn my son alive. I blinked innocently and responded in a calm voice. Mom, why are you so emotional? Everyone has to go into the crematorium after death. Then I narrowed my eyes. Or, were you planning to secretly bury him? That won't do. We mustn't cause trouble for the state. Such thoughts are absolutely unacceptable. I raised my voice slightly, ensuring that everyone nearby heard every word. The murmurs around us grew louder, and Bruno's mother had no choice but to change tactics. She threw herself onto Bruno's hospital bed, wailing dramatically. My poor son, why did you leave me like this? Look at this! You've barely left, and everyone is bullying us. But after my experiences in my previous life, I could easily see through her act. Her sobs were loud, but no real tears fell. Bruno's father glared at me, his voice filled with resentment. Bruno, look at your wife. You just died, and she's already heartless. Can't someone help us? I suppressed my burning hatred, put on a sweet smile, and looked at them calmly. Mom, what are you doing? Do you want Bruno's soul to be restless? Some onlookers nodded in agreement. The daughter-in-law is right. You should let your son rest in peace. That's true. Old lady, your son has passed away. You need to accept it. More and more people gathered, cutting off their escape route. Bruno's parents had no way to argue with me. They could only glare at me, their hands trembling in fury. But they had no rebuttal. Then, as expected, they resorted to their usual trick, dramatic self-harm. Bruno's mother ran toward the nearest wall. If anyone touches my son, I'll die right here. Even as she shouted, her eyes darted toward me, waiting for my reaction. But I stood still, my expression completely indifferent. This was their oldest trick. In my previous life, when Bruno's high-interest debts came knocking, I couldn't bear to see his elderly parents suffer, so I took all the debts upon myself. At first, I worked one job every day and came home to cook for them. Later, I worked 2 jobs, and it became difficult to cook and take care of Bruno's parents. So I suggested they manage on their own. But Bruno's parents had become so accustomed to my care that they refused to do anything for themselves. They complained to the neighbors every day about me. They spread rumors, and I could only grit my teeth and endure it. By the time I was working 3 jobs, I didn't even have time to drink water, let alone take care of them. Bruno's parents cried, threw tantrums, and even practiced the dramatic art of banging their heads against the wall. They shouted that I was unfilial and wanted to die. In the end, I had to cut down on my already minimal sleep. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been drained dry in just 5 years. This time, it was just the same old routine, more moral manipulation. I coldly watched their performance. Bruno's mother didn't even hit the wall with any force, and Bruno's father didn't make any real effort to stop her. They clung to each other, crying pitifully by the wall. But it was all for show, thunder without rain. As more and more people gathered around, I looked up, and tears began to fall from my eyes. I forced myself to appear as if I was enduring their nonsense and showing my quiet strength. Dad, Mom, it's better to end this quickly. Bruno is dead. Accept reality, even if you don't understand. It doesn't matter. No matter what, Bruno will be cremated today. Bruno's parents were stunned, not expecting me to be so unmoved. They stared at me in disbelief. But the situation couldn't be dragged out any longer. The 6 hours were almost up. They began to switch tactics and tried to soften me. Miriam, this is your husband. You two were so close. How can you bear to burn him alive? I suddenly laughed out loud. Mom, Bruno is dead. How could I burn him alive? Is he pretending to be dead? Chapter 3. One sentence. That was all it took to silence the entire room. A strange tension hung in the air. People started noticing that something was off. Because really, why so much hesitation over a simple cremation? Oh my God. Do you think there's something suspicious going on? No way. Modern medicine is advanced. If he's dead, he's dead. But look at his parents. They're acting really weird. And the way they look at their daughter-in-law, like she's their enemy. The whispers piled on. Bruno's mother couldn't take it anymore. She lunged at me, about to drop the act and confront me directly. But Bruno's father grabbed her arm, stopping her just in time. I felt a small pang of disappointment. He was more patient than I thought. Just then, the doctor walked in. Bruno's family, my condolences. But considering the summer heat, it's best to cremate him as soon as possible. I coldly glanced at Bruno's parents. If they refused to admit the truth, then they would just have to watch their son burn alive. Bruno's father went pale, his voice trembling as he shouted, "No! I am Bruno's father, and I do not agree." I smirked. Your consent doesn't matter. I am Bruno's wife, and legally, I have the final say. Bruno's parents were so furious they nearly jumped in place. But they couldn't do anything, because by law, I had more decision-making power than they did. And seeing them so helpless, I pretended to be confused. Dad, Mom, Bruno is already dead. There's no point in delaying this any further. Then, I turned toward Bruno's body. He had remained conscious the entire time. And now, hearing that his perfect plan had failed, that he was about to be thrown into the flames for real, even though he couldn't move or speak, I could tell. He was panicking. Bruno must have been panicking inside, even though his body couldn't react. His mind was fully awake. His eyelids twitched slightly, struggling to open, but the movement was so minor that no one else noticed. Except me. I smirked inwardly. Taking a step closer, I leaned down to his ear, my voice soft, mocking, merciless. Bruno, don't blame me. It was your own parents who decided your death wouldn't be so easy. Then, I lifted my head, my eyes brimming with fake tears, and gazed at the crowd with a sorrowful expression. Actually, maybe there's a better solution. The onlookers turned their attention to me, curious. My husband was always a generous man. In life, he often said he wanted to do something meaningful for the world. I sighed, pretending to be overwhelmed with grief. So, I've decided to donate his body to science. All usable organs will be extracted and donated. The rest will be given to the hospital for medical research. Then, I turned to Bruno's parents, a sweet yet deadly smile on my lips. Dad, Mom, now, whenever you miss him, you can visit him at the hospital. As soon as I finished speaking, Bruno's mother let out a blood-curdling scream. What did you say? You wicked woman! Don't you dare touch my son! Fake tears streamed down my face. I looked at my mother-in-law with wide, innocent eyes. Mom, please, respect Bruno's last wish. He told me himself before he passed. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Such an admirable act. If his wife is this noble, her husband must have been the same. Yes, definitely raised with good values. Their parents must be wonderful people. Bruno's mother stiffened. The approving gazes of the crowd cornered her. She couldn't argue without ruining her own reputation. Even the doctor seemed pleased. This is a remarkable gesture. Your family truly has a big heart. But Bruno knew exactly what was coming. His eyelids trembled with pure terror. The veins in his wrists bulged from the strain. But he couldn't open his eyes. I let out a quiet laugh. They said 6 hours. Bruno, and it will be 6 hours, not a minute less. I watched as he failed again and again, trapped in a body that wouldn't listen. Finally, I got bored. I adjusted the white sheet over his face, erasing any trace of his desperate attempts. Then, I smiled at the doctor. Please begin the organ extraction. It was my husband's final wish. As the medical team prepared, Bruno's parents wailed and screamed in despair. But this was only the beginning, the first step in making them all pay. Wait, don't move him just yet. Chapter 4. Bruno's father, pale as a ghost, was on the verge of passing out from sheer shock. With trembling legs, he staggered toward me. Daughter-in-law, please, don't dissect him. I agree. I agree to the cremation. I raised an eyebrow. Skeptical. You agree? His lips quivered, as if he had just made the hardest decision of his life. Yes. I agree, but I wasn't satisfied yet. I turned toward Bruno's mother, my eyes calm and indifferent. Mom, do you agree as well? Her gaze was blank, but filled with hatred. I innocently blinked, pretending not to notice. For a long moment, she stayed silent. Then, with great difficulty, as if it pained her to admit defeat, she forced out, I agree. The onlookers watched intently. Bruno's parents, who had screamed and fought so hard, were now powerless to stop anything. Perhaps they truly couldn't accept this outcome, because the next moment, they both collapsed unconscious. As Bruno's body was wheeled away for cremation, I felt a sense of unease rise within me. I didn't believe for a second that his parents would let things go so easily. They must have had something planned, but whatever scheme they came up with, I wouldn't let them succeed. The doctor later informed me. Bruno's parents fainted from extreme shock. They'll need 2 days of hospitalization before being discharged. I didn't care. Instead of waiting around, I turned and headed straight home, because if my memory was correct, Bruno had won $50 million in the lottery before his death. Bruno's parents believed he had faked his death just to escape debt. They had no idea about the lottery money, which meant this was my best chance to claim it. Having lived with Bruno for years, I knew his habits, his hiding places, his weaknesses, and one thing I understood best. People always hide their most valuable possessions in places where they feel safe. For Bruno, that place was his study, and sure enough, I found the ticket, tucked between the pages of a book. My heart pounded as I rushed to check the ticket online. A few moments later, I let out a slow, relieved sigh. Nothing had changed. The ticket was still valid. But instead of cashing it in immediately, I hid it somewhere safe. The lottery had a 2-month redemption period. There was no rush. I knew the real danger hadn't passed yet, but now that I had secured my biggest weapon, I feared nothing. That very afternoon, I took Bruno's ID and his death certificate to the police station. I officially had his identity erased from the system. The moment I stepped out of the police station, Bruno was legally dead. No chance of returning. No way of undoing it. That night, for the first time in 5 years, I slept peacefully. For the next 3 days, I rested at home, waiting for the phone call that I knew would come. As expected, on the 4th day, Bruno's mother called me. She didn't disappoint me at all. Miriam, where are you? Hurry and save us. If you take any longer, we're going to die. I deliberately took my time, lazily making my way to Bruno's parents' house. Looking back, the signs had always been there. I was just lying to myself. For example, when Bruno bought a house, he put it under his parents' names. Meanwhile, the house we lived in after marriage was just rented, and if I dared to question it, I was labeled disrespectful. But luckily, I knew that soon enough, that house would no longer be theirs. Even before I went upstairs, I could hear the chaos inside. When I arrived, the living room was already a mess. The moment I stepped in, I saw 3 burly men staring at me menacingly. You're Miriam, right? I heard you have money. Before I could respond, Bruno's father anxiously spoke up to the man leading the group. Yes. Victor, believe me, my daughter-in-law has money. If someone owes you money, it's her. Ask her. Then, without hesitation, he dropped to his knees, begging for mercy. We're just an old couple, useless and weak. Please, have mercy on us. Bruno's mother, who hated me for sending her son into the crematorium, gritted her teeth with resentment. Even if she has no money, It doesn't matter. My daughter-in-law is still quite attractive. Trust me. If you sell her, she'll fetch a good price. Yes. Make her sell herself. She can pay the debt with her body. Chapter 5. My hatred for Bruno's parents was unsurprising. We had already torn off all pretenses back at the hospital. In my past life, they probably only put on an act because they needed me. It was a pity I realized their fake kindness too late. It turns out you two really are shameless. Your son stole $4 million from my brother to gamble. And now you, as his parents, want to wash your hands of it by forcing your daughter-in-law into prostitution? How disgusting can you be? Victor's words caught me off guard. In my past life, Victor wasn't this reasonable. I wasn't sure what kind of butterfly effect had changed things this time. But truth be told, Victor had treated me fairly well before. He had helped me a few times out of pity. Unfortunately, he later died of sudden cardiac arrest. I never had the chance to repay him before. But now, I wanted to try. I pulled Victor aside onto the balcony and cautiously asked, "Victor, do you have heart problems?" Victor scoffed at me. "Don't try that trick on me. It won't work. No matter what, you have to pay up." I knew he still didn't trust me. "Victor, you've misunderstood my intentions. Paying off debts is only right. It's the natural order of things. But you've seen it yourself. Expecting Bruno's parents to pay you back? That's nearly impossible. I know you're just here to collect a debt. Everyone's got a tough job to do. I have a good plan, but I need your cooperation to make sure your money doesn't go to waste." We returned to the living room. Bruno's parents had apparently been uncooperative and had been disciplined by the other two enforcers. Now, bruised and battered, they were crouched on the floor, shivering. As soon as they saw me enter, their eyes burned with venomous hatred. Yet, when they turned to Victor, their gaze became pitiful and desperate. "Victor, no matter what this B*TCH says, don't believe her. We really don't have any money left." "Oh, really?" I sighed softly. "But why do I remember you still have your retirement savings hidden in the wardrobe?" In my past life, I had also believed they were broke. Who would have thought that on the very night I finished paying off all their debts, I would overhear their whispers outside my bedroom door? Miriam is such an idiot. She gave us a place to stay and work like a slave for 5 years. Thanks to her, we managed to save up a whole million, and we even got a free maid to serve us every day. A cold wave crashed over me, drenching me in despair, leaving my entire body frozen. Their voices were especially clear in the darkness. "All right, let's just admire it for a moment. But make sure she never finds out. Hurry up and hide the money back in the wardrobe." At that moment, I could barely stand. Even if they had spared just a little thought for me in those 5 years, I wouldn't have been forced into a life of exhaustion, waking before dawn and working myself to the bone. That very night, I collapsed and was rushed to the hospital. The doctor told me my body had completely deteriorated. There was no treatment left. And Bruno's parents? They never visited me, not even once. If I hadn't had a little money left after paying off their loan sharks, I wouldn't have even had a place to go. The next time I saw them, they had come with Bruno to flaunt their success in front of me. If karma truly exists, then heaven spares no one. I should actually thank them for telling me the truth in my past life. Otherwise, even in this life, I would have ended up as their obedient workhorse again. "Why you? How do you know that?" Bruno's father looked at me in panic, never expecting me to know so much. When he saw Victor heading toward his bedroom wardrobe, he tried to block his way, only to be met with a hard slap across the face. "You old bastard. Didn't you just say you had no money? Looks like you've been asking for a beating." Bruno's mother watched in utter despair, powerless to stop anything from happening. She could only glare at me and spit out venomous curses, calling me worthless and unfit to be her son's wife. Seeing how energetic she still was, I suddenly remembered something. "Oh, right. Mom, I recall Bruno buying you some gold jewelry. Should be under your bed, right? That should be worth around 300,000. If I'm not worthy of being a good daughter-in-law to your family, then surely, as Bruno's good mother, you wouldn't mind making some sacrifices for your precious son, right? And one more thing, Victor, this house is under Bruno's parents' names. Bruno owes you money, so it's only fair that you take it as collateral. Should be worth at least 2 million. don't you think? After saying that, I looked at Bruno's parents with an innocent expression, feigning regret. Dad, Mom, don't blame me for this. It's just that Bruno didn't leave me anything. Even our marital home was just a rental. If he had left me something, I would have gladly helped you out. Chapter 6. If looks could kill, Bruno's parents would have slaughtered me 1,000,000 times over by now. But what could they do? No matter how much they hated me, they were powerless against me. TCH. How dare you treat us like this? You'll die a horrible death. Honestly, I enjoyed watching them seethe in fury, knowing they couldn't do a thing to me. Mom, how can you blame me for this? If you really want someone to blame, blame your dead son. If I were you, I'd start thinking about how to survive from now on. You're not really about to be homeless, are you? Bruno's father was so enraged that he suddenly started coughing violently beside me. It looked like he was in serious pain. He clutched his head tightly and even slammed his fist against it a few times. Bruno's mother panicked and rushed to his side. What's wrong? Don't scare me like this. What am I supposed to do if something happens to you? I calmly watched the ridiculous scene unfold before me and then took a step closer to Bruno's mother. Auntie, don't you think this is karma? You do too much evil, and it comes right back to you. Her expression flickered between shock and rage. But more than anything, I could see fear creeping into her eyes. That very night, Bruno's father was rushed to the hospital. I didn't care. I simply turned around and went home. At dawn, my phone started ringing nonstop. Bruno's mother. I didn't understand how she had the audacity to call me. I turned off my phone, restoring the peace and quiet it deserved. The next day, the hospital informed me that Bruno's father had died overnight because they couldn't afford his treatment. Meanwhile, Bruno's mother had suffered a mental breakdown from the back-to-back tragedies. They asked if I could come to see her. 2 lives lost in just 2 days. As I sighed at how unpredictable life could be, the corners of my lips curled slightly. Then, I headed to the lottery office to cash out my winnings. With everything finally settled, I could finally let go of the weight on my heart. I went out and bought myself a home. In the past, I never had a place of my own to call home. I was always hoping for someone else's love, someone else's family. I'd had enough of that feeling. From now on, I would learn to love myself. I tracked down Victor and paid off the last 500,000 Bruno owed. This was the agreement I had made with Victor. He helped me recover 5 million, and I paid off 500,000 on my own. It was the price to save the lives of Bruno and his family. From this point on, I was truly free of any debt. The sky was high, and the sea vast. I could soar freely. After settling this final matter, Victor stood up, ready to leave. I thought about his fate in my past life. Victor, I have another proposal. Would you like to hear it? In my previous life, Victor had died of a heart attack while fighting with someone else. He was a good person at heart. I knew he had no choice but to step into the world of loan sharks. But it was never going to be a long-term solution. I trusted Victor's character. Now that I had money and he had people working for him, why not team up and start a security company? It seemed like a win-win situation. Victor took 2 days to think it over before agreeing to my idea. The partnership was settled just like that. I started handling all the paperwork and preparing for the company, staying busier than ever. The next time I saw Bruno's mother was on my way to finalize the business license. She was picking up trash by the roadside, looking dazed. Her hair was disheveled, sticking to her face, giving her a dirty and untidy appearance. She looked at least 10 years older. If I hadn't known her for so many years, I might not have recognized her. I coldly averted my gaze, feeling nothing inside. People like her were irrelevant to me. Why should I care? By the time I got the business license, it was already 5:30 in the afternoon. In City A, it gets dark early, and by this time, the sky was already dimming slightly. There were fewer pedestrians on the street. I parked my car in a somewhat secluded spot, and suddenly, a bad feeling crept up on me before I could react. A sudden force hit me from behind. A strong smell of ether rushed up, covering my mouth and nose. I struggled with all my might, but it was useless. In the haze, I thought I saw a familiar figure. Then, everything went black, and I lost consciousness. Chapter 7. When I woke up, I found myself tied up in the backseat of a car, surrounded by desolate emptiness. I felt a wave of panic, but I pinched my palm and forced myself to calm down. The person who had kidnapped me never once tried to hide their identity, or rather, there was only one person who had kidnapped me. At that moment, the headlights suddenly switched on, and the person slowly removed their hat. It revealed a face I knew all too well. It was him, Bruno. He saw me wake up and grinned maliciously. Long time no see, Miriam. It had been a while, and he had clearly fallen from grace. His clothes were filthy, and he was covered in bruises. Seeing me look at him with confusion, his grin grew even more sinister. Didn't expect this, did you, Miriam? To end up in my hands? You evil woman. It's your fault my father died. It's because of you that my family's been torn apart, and we've lost everything. I couldn't help but laugh. I didn't know where he got the audacity to say such things to me. Wasn't it him who had caused the ruin of his family? His greed was the root of all this. But seeing his face full of despair, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. It seemed that he had finally realized that his dead father and his mother, now picking up trash, were the consequences of his actions. It was no regret on my part to let him go that time. When Bruno's parents had suddenly fainted in the hospital, I knew something was off. They must have had another plan. Otherwise, with the way Bruno's parents were, they would never have agreed to cremation. I had seen them bribing people in the hospital while I was pretending to go to the restroom. While I wasn't looking, they had switched Bruno with a mannequin. Their plan was flawless. I had originally intended to expose them, but then I remembered the 5 years I spent as their servant because of Bruno's selfishness. I changed my mind. Letting Bruno die so easily would be too merciful for him. I should make him suffer slowly, piece by piece. So, I pretended not to know anything, calmly returned home, and hid the lottery ticket away. I couldn't let Bruno get his hands on it. Then, I went straight to the police station to cancel Bruno's household registration, making sure he would live like a mute, completely in the dark, without a household registration and without the lottery ticket. Life wouldn't be as easy for him as it was in the past. I had Victor surround Bruno's house, ensuring that even if Bruno recovered from the drug, he wouldn't have a place to return to. He'd be forced to wander. I had driven Bruno's parents to death and madness. I wanted him to watch his parents suffer with no way to help, to struggle in agony, worse than death. In the end, I knew that, given Bruno's nature, he would eventually come looking for me. So, I learned a few self-defense tricks from Victor. Against big men, it would be impossible. But Bruno? He was no match for me. What I didn't expect was that Bruno had more patience than I thought. And he didn't show up for a long time. I didn't want to wait for him like I was guarding against a thief every day. So, I decided to lure him out, turning the tables on him. I started driving alone every day. Lowering his guard, I deliberately parked in a secluded spot, giving Bruno the chance to make his move. When I smelled the distinct odor of the knockout drug, I knew it. He was here. Bruno, I really have to thank you. Slowly wearing you down is the best way to get my revenge. If you hadn't shown up, I honestly wouldn't have known how to extinguish the burning hatred in my heart. I squinted my eyes, smiling as I looked at him. Yeah, Bruno, it's been a long time. It's really great to see you again. Chapter 8. Bruno saw me smiling, and I wasn't reacting with the fear he had imagined, which made him even more aggressive. He kept waving the knife in front of my face. You filthy B***TCH. You tried to burn me alive before, and today I'm going to make you pay. Did you steal my lottery ticket? Give me the money back. Seeing Bruno's vicious expression, I pretended to be scared to lower his guard. Taking advantage of his momentary distraction, I quickly snatched the knife from his hand and swiftly slashed at his eyes. Bruno, enraged, didn't expect me to fight back and lunged at me to take the knife away. I acted terrified, my voice trembling in fear. No, please don't come any closer. I'm sorry. I really am sorry. Then I stabbed him again. Bruno was stabbed twice, each time hitting the bone, and blood poured from his wounds. The look in his eyes had started to show fear. I smiled at him, still saying I was scared, but without hesitation. I stabbed him again. Bruno, remember this is what you owe me. His eyes grew more and more desperate, which I couldn't help but enjoy just a little bit. Don't worry. I won't kill you with my own hands. I'm afraid it'll soil my hands. I fed him the last concentration pill. You like faking your death, right? Well, now I'll let you experience the real feeling of being burned alive. His eyelids twitched slightly, a sign of his unwillingness. But sadly, this time I wouldn't give him the chance to fake his death. The moment I pressed the cremation button with my own hands, the last trace of hatred inside me vanished. From then on, Bruno and his family received the punishment they deserved, and I could finally begin my own life. The security company Victor and I started surprisingly did very well. Soon, we opened a second, then a third. Victor was full of ambition, wanting to grow and expand. The dark clouds eventually passed, and the sunshine would come, sooner or later. Loving life begins with loving yourself. Everyone deserves to have a bright tomorrow. Extra Bruno. In my second year of college, it was the first time I met Miriam. I thought she was different from everyone else, always carrying an air of mystery. Later, I came to understand that feeling. It was called loneliness. Other people's parents were still alive, but Miriam's parents had been gone for 10 years. I found myself more and more drawn to her, and finally, I made up my mind to officially pursue her. The day she agreed to be with me, the sun was so bright that I didn't even hear clearly what she said next, that she would never forgive me if I betrayed her, and that I would pay the price. Later, I took Miriam to meet my parents. I didn't expect them to dislike her so much, and I had no idea that she would endure so much for me. Somewhere along the way, I started to take Miriam's sacrifices for granted. Her grievances faded from my mind, and I slowly forgot my promise to make her happy for the rest of her life. Time passed in a dull haze, and the white moonlight finally turned into just a speck of dust on the wall. All the changes began when I won the lottery, 50 million. I had never seen so much money in my life. It could give me a better life, with more beautiful women. So, I didn't tell anyone, but I did confess to my parents that I owed money and planned to fake my death to avoid the debt, leaving Miriam behind to pay it off for me. I had everything planned perfectly, until the moment Miriam came to the hospital and slapped me. That's when I suddenly felt like something was out of control. At that moment, I felt not just anger, but also panic. I listened to my parents' angry insults toward Miriam and her calm retorts. She even tried to have me burned alive. I fought with all my strength to wake up, but I was powerless. I started to panic and fear. I regretted it. Why had I let things escalate to this point? But there was no going back. Later, I was swapped out by my parents' hired people. When I woke up, all I could feel was coldness. I thought of ways to return home, only to find that the door was surrounded by Victor's men. I wanted to grab the lottery ticket, but I found that Miriam had already moved out. Everything was happening too quickly. My father died, my mother went insane, and I became an illegal citizen, unworthy of existing in this world. I wasn't willing to accept this, so I decided to seek revenge on Miriam. As I was thrown into the cremation furnace, my body consumed by flames, some unfamiliar images suddenly flashed through my mind. It was Miriam, her face full of hatred, staring at me from the hospital bed. I remembered the vow Miriam made to me when she was in college. She was right. It wasn't anyone else who killed my parents, it was my own greed. Those who betray sincere love deserve to die, including me.